This is Apotheosis, the official podcast of the Production Designers Collective. I'm your host, Alexander Whittenberg. Today, we're joined by production designer KK Barrett, whose credits include Lost in Translation, Her, and Being John Malkovich. We chat about exploring Tokyo for Lost in Translation, scale as emotion, the importance of looking at the world through the lens of a character, and the joys of failure. Please note that due to the demanding schedules of those in our industry, these conversations are recorded in a nomadic and remote space, which may lead to inconsistencies in quality, but we'll always do our best to deliver a great listening experience. If you've been enjoying Apotheosis, please consider taking a moment to rate the podcast and share with those who might also enjoy the program. And now, here's my conversation with KK Barrett. I'm going to start with the question that it's a lofty question, and I've changed the way that I've worded it, because I used to say, how do you define creativity? And that felt far too sort of like, boxed in to define it, instead of just sort of asking, what does creativity mean to you? Because I know that answer can change on a moment-to-moment basis. So Saturday, February 28th, I'm going to ask, what does creativity mean to you?
Creativity means to me to be busy exploring new things that come out of the ether, like sitting down with a blank piece of paper, beginning to record audio, music, either drawing or writing, or I do all these exercises to constantly keep in tune with spontaneity so I can make decisions. And all of that is like creative going to the gym, just little things that don't have an assignment, they don't have a purpose. They're just ongoing exercises in keeping fresh at making decisions and being able to offer solutions to other people if I'm on assignment.
That's great.
Also, creativity, there's a bigger picture about creativity. I was talking to a bunch of grad students in Savannah, and somebody said, where do your ideas come from? Where does your creativity come from? And I said, that's such an embarrassing question, because if you look at kids, you're born with all of this creativity and this curiosity. And somewhere along the line, if you have to ask that question, you must have lost it. Because kids' brains are just full of imagination, and they know the difference between reality and imagination, but they live in both constantly parallel.
Yeah, it's all about the duality. It's interesting because I feel like somewhere along the lines, the imagination gets overpowered by the rules.
First rule of creativity is, ignore it. Don't if there's an assignment, look at the prompt and then go, yeah, but they don't really want that. Yeah. and then think of something that will surprise them, because I think that if you're hired as a creative person, that's your job.
Yes,
is to deliver something that hasn't been delivered before, or an angle of it that hasn't been delivered before, or to open the process to engage with other people for creative solutions. Like, okay, let's just say, what if we could just do anything we wanted? What would it be? Mm-hmm. Now you're talking creatively rather than, and then you weed it back down to applying to whatever the solution that's needed is.
I'm going to say something, and I'm curious what comes to mind when I say tender as the night, Hollywood poetry.
You did some deep digging. You found it.
I found it. Do I get a prize now?
You get a prize. There's 3 episodes. Did you watch all 3?
Of course.
Yeah. Well, that just shows that that was before I was in film. I might have stuck my toe in the water a little bit on an independent film that I didn't know what anybody's role was, and somebody said, "Oh, you're the art director, you're the production designer." And I said, "What is that?" You know. So that was a really good moment, because that's the moment that I got my first apartment in Los Angeles that was really decent, and I had time to explore things, and all I did was draw and paint and make music in that apartment with my wife, who's also in that episode. And what's fun is we're drawing in these books, and we can't tell whose drawing is whose. After a while, we start mind melding and creative melding together.
Yeah. One of the things you say in there is, it's not like you're going to invent anything new in this game. It's just that you're going to make some new combinations.
I've kind of changed my attitude about that, because I keep hearing like, well, everything's been done, so, and I just think that's the most negative statement you can possibly make, because that's not true. Because when we were watching that, when we were making that film, we didn't know about the internet. We didn't know about Zooms. We didn't know about all kinds of things that foster creativity. There's been new photography since then. There was no digital photography then, you know, and the manipulation that comes with it. So I don't think creativity ever stops. I don't think anything's all been done before. I think that unfortunately too often people repeat what's been done before, thinking that's the set, that's the table of contents to pull creatively from. But I think that's the wrong idea.
There is still a sense of this like combination of processing what you're experiencing out in the world and having that sort of influence what it is that you're creating with your design or music or art or whatever it is you're creating at any given moment.
Yeah, that's very true, because you're constantly inputting, you're constantly observing, being curious, taking in what puzzles you or what delights you, and then applying that to something else that you're working on. And so you're constantly building a larger table of contents to pull from.
Yeah. There's another moment from the KK Barrett archives that I think is pretty fantastic, and that is Population 1.
Yes. Well, that was my first movie. That was the one I was talking about.
Yeah, yeah. And, you know, what's great about that is, of course, it seems to be fueled by curiosity and exploring and trying things and embracing the unknown. What is it that you've maintained about that sense of curiosity from when you were first making that Population 1?
At the time when I made that, I had been a musician for 2 years, and then this film project came along, and we kind of adapted into working on a narrative. And the director said, I asked the director, I built a recording studio for the project, and then I asked the director who's going to design the sets for these little short films that we were making at the time. It began as short films. And he said, I don't know. And I just volunteered, and I said, I will. And he said, okay. And that was my first production design job. And not knowing what I was responsible for, but I thought I was responsible for building the sets, you know, designing them and building the sets, which I was, and everything else. There was I had some help, but it was the blind leading the blind. And what I learned was, I thought of sets at that time as sculptural spaces to, have actions happen within. And it's very much the same. I always think of sets as sculptural spaces that collect light, collect shadows. But now I'm much more educated about their involvement in story and how they support a character's vision of the world, as opposed to just making something for myself that's entertaining as like an artist or a sculptor. Now I understand and get much more excited about how it applies to the basic clothing that the character wears in a bigger world sense. you know,
Yeah, absolutely.
a background world sense.
Yeah, well, I think about, taste versus character, and in a situation where you need to be sort of wary of making sure you're not making a decision simply based on sort of the aesthetic values of what it is you're doing, right? Ensuring that it is actually moving something along in some way and connecting to the characters.
It's a fine line because I totally agree with you in that you can't be selfish about it and just say, well, I'm just going to build this and disregard how it applies to the character, or if the character would even acknowledge such decoration or colors, or it may not be in their fabric whatsoever. But at the same time, I do trust my taste, my own personal taste, and I think every designer trusts their taste and applies it, but it really does need to be filtered through the character.
I want to jump back to music for a moment because you mentioned music, and I know that's been a through line through sort of your whole life. Do you still create music for yourself or with friends?
Yeah, I do. I do both. My ambition this year was to write a piece of music every day, and similar to like at one point I was making 5 drawings every morning, and then I was making 5 collages every morning, or writing 5 stories, just like a single page, so that at the beginning of the day you felt like you'd accomplished something. And then I started writing music and just sitting down and spontaneously playing music and recording it, and then adding layers to it. But it's gotten way late and I have to catch up. So I realized that's not going to be as easy as the drawing or the other things that are quicker to get down.
How do you bookend your day? If you start with these sort of sketches, whether musical or drawn or written, how do you end it?
Well, I start with something written or drawn, and the music thing seems, maybe it's my history of that's where music always was. It tends to be at the end of the night.
How does music and your sense of music affect your work as a production designer?
I think it's all the same. I think that it's creative decision making I think I've said this before, I think of the song structure as a film structure. You have an introduction where you're meeting the ideas, the characters, the tone, and then you develop it over a number of scenes, which are verses, and then you have a chorus which calls back to the main theme of whatever the story is. And then if you blow the ending, everybody forgets what you've done, both in music and in film, in storytelling. If you don't have to wrap it up, but you have to send the audience away thinking, pondering what happened after your story, now that they've been given all of this ammunition of content.
Right. What is it that Bill Murray whispered to Scarlett Johansson, right?
Yeah, exactly. What a perfect ending, because none of us know.
Yeah. I want to actually stick to Lost in Translation for a second, because I know you entered the project sort of at the last minute, and you just sort of arrived in Tokyo and dove right into the project. As far as I understand, you sort of just explored the city, seeking these moments or places where you could kind of hit different beats of the film. How did you sort of get lost yourself in Tokyo to find these spaces?
I had been there before on a commercial, and I just kind of scouted it, and that was with Spike Jonze, Sophia's husband at the time. And so they had friends in common, so I kind of knew a little bit about the world. And these friends would play parts in Bill's journey through the city. But I learned something very important in that film, which was you can play the part of the character, and whatever the character sees that you think would delight them, then that's something that you could put in the film. So I became Charlotte's eyes and would filtered through what I knew Sophia liked and would see, So we look over there, and if she likes that, that can be in part of the program. And over here, and if it's something over there, like a big factory belching smoke, that even though that's right there out of frame, that's not part of what she would notice or pay attention to. So that's out of the system.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah. You got to fit it in the Venn diagram.
Yeah. And so I took that with every film after that. I just became the character. You've got to really look through the character's eyes, and they don't notice everything because you have a very short time to spend with them and learn about what, you don't know their whole history. You just learn, bang, where they are in the present. And their surroundings have to support that.
Yeah. I think it's beautiful. It's still one of my favorite films. I just rewatched it recently. And it is sort of a meditation.
It's like wandering. It's like a person from another culture wandering without fear. We've seen all these sci-fi movies where people from another culture come down and instill fear, or be amused. But it's kind of like Man Who Fell to Earth. I mean, here you are, and you're aware, you're smart, but you're still adjusting to the culture and taking different things in. And so that's the floatiness of it. Charlotte is having to bide time because she's not there with a purpose. And so she just explores.
Floatiness is a great word.
Is it a real word?
I don't know if it is or not. It's a great word, though. I'm gonna use it now. Have you been back to Tokyo since that film?
I have been back to Tokyo since that film. I did another short project there. I miss it. I want to go back again. Yeah.
How has your experience changed going back after that film? Were you drawn to different things when you were there? Was there a new energy you found?
Well, the first time you go, you're just amazed at so many little things that are different from here, like having little vending machines on every corner, and the density of population and incessant signage and all that kind of stuff. And at the time, they had different electronics than we had, and we were really excited about that. Different cameras, different size phones that their antennas lit up, when you call. Anyway, everything was completely different. It's become a little bit more in line now because news travels faster. With the internet, everybody's aware of every other part of the world quickly. So it's not quite the same as the first time discovery, but it never is. And the second time, I spent a lot less time in Tokyo Central and more out in the outer towns because I was there on a project that took place in an outer town. So, but again, it was another exploration. It was a calmer version.
Well, it wouldn't be very interesting if it's the same every time.
No.
How important is food and drink to you when you travel to a new place? Like seeking out meals that are going to be really kind of amazing, or are you just sort of more improvisational, like stumbling into whatever place catches your eye?
Yeah, I'm not that guy that looks up on Yelp and see where to go and this and that. Unfortunately, or fortunately for me, other people take care of that and are tuned into that aren't doing. Production people are very thrilled about that. I'm more thrilled about where we're going to stay.
Okay, very
where
good.
We're going to eat. But I've been taken to very amazing restaurants because of other people's interest in that. So maybe if I hadn't done that, maybe I'd be more inclined to seek it out myself. But it's not what drives me. I'd rather go to museums and little shops and crazy things like that.
Yeah. Talk to me about the late nights of karaoke in Tokyo while filming Lost in Translation.
Well, I had the best job because a few things had been discovered already. The Park Hyatt was already going to be a location, and that was figured out, and the TV studio was figured out. But there were a lot of nightlife things that weren't figured out. And some of them I knew about, and I knew the stories that they were generated from. And so I had to go out and look for karaoke bars. So we'd all meet every morning, as you do, to open the set. make sure everything was going well, and then I'd have to disappear and get things moving, get my team moving that I had just met, and then we'd all meet again at dinner. The core group would always come together at dinner, and we ate at this little restaurant behind where we were staying, and we would just say, we trust the chef, and the chef would surprise us every night. And so it was a complete exploration of like crazy things. One night we ate bird brains. Another night I had chicken sashimi, which sounds scary, but it's, you know.
Gosh, it does.
We were just wide open and gambled, and the food was amazing. But then I'd say, okay, well, guys, you know, I gotta leave because I've got to go scout karaoke bars and lights in the city at night. And they'd go like, karaoke bars? I want to go.
Yeah.
So a lot of people would end up wanting to go, and we wouldn't explore as much as we'd like anchor into a place and have fun.
When you're working and you have to be on set at 6 a.m. or whatever, are you still going to bed at a decent hour the night before, or do you like to go out and just kind of have these adventures?
Well, I was jet lagged because I had just come in the night before we started filming. And usually, like when I hit a new town, the first thing I like to do is go out and walk my perimeter, like what's within 2, 3, 5, 10 blocks, and whether I get there at night or get there in the morning, I like to kind of do both and see what it looks like in the dark and see if it's safe or not, and gamble with your life, and then see what it looks like at dawn, and all these different things, because the city will completely present itself differently. And so that's a fun exploration. And I wouldn't stay out just to stay out, but I would stay out to see what the world looked like, in different light.
I want to talk about scale real quick. How does scale come into conversation with you and your collaborators?
Scale is really important. I've also lectured at architecture schools and in architecture branches of universities, as well as film. And I always say, I had this great thing where I was invited for the summer with a core group of architects that were designing things in collaboration with each other. They were given a site to go walk to, and they said, okay, there's going to be a new building here. How does it relate to the other buildings, and what is it? And I realized that all the architects were designing from God's eye, which is not, wow. It's not a film point of view. It's become an abused film point of view with drones, which are the most boring shot next to watching somebody on a computer. But
it's very of the moment, though, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, so architects would build sculptures to themselves, but that's not the user version of a building. And so I said, okay, only show me the building from the sidewalk's point of view. Going through the door. I don't want to see what the whole facade looks like. I only want to see what the user experience is as they go in off the street, how it relates to other buildings, and when you go inside, what happens. And I think it was Frank Lloyd Wright who always made kind of a cave lower entrance so that when you went into a place, it opened up and was more amazing because you'd kind of tuck down and then the light lifted over your head,
Yeah. You must always keep humanity in mind, the humane experience.
Yeah.
I was just in New York City again recently, and I was asking a friend who lives there, like, doesn't all the scaffolding bother you? It's like every building in New York is surrounded by scaffolding. And his response was, oh, I didn't really notice it. It's like, and it's this sense of like always either being on the phone or looking ahead and making sure that your path is clear, which, practical concerns in a sense. But on the other hand, it's like, well, gosh, it didn't occur to me not to be looking up and feeling that closure, you know?
It's also pervasive, so you just don't think about it. But like when I come from California to New York, there's two things that you notice instantly is the light's usually blocked out. You know, unless it's midday sun, you've either got the shadows of what you call the canyons, which are definitely of scale, or you've got scaffolding overhead. You had it in Tokyo too, although the scaffolding was bamboo. It was quite interesting sometimes. Scale is really important though, because you could call landscape scale. It doesn't have to be vertical. It has to be, if somebody is thinking and pondering and you're in their head and they're not speaking, you can show them small on a horizon, or you can dwarf them by bigger elements, which may represent bigger problems or the weight of the world or the outside world itself. It doesn't always have to be oppressive. It can be internal. It's funny how you can go inside somebody's mind by showing them small in a big space.
Yeah, that's true. Scale as emotion. And I think, you know, or as a literal storytelling tool. I mean, if we think of Seventh and a Half Floor and being John Malkovich, there's a literal scale game happening there. And it is also greatly affecting the actor's physicality, their need to bend over, which is, of course, affecting their performance, right? So there's layers of influence happening here.
And I don't know if people notice, but it also gets more and more oppressive because he starts in a basement apartment where he could at least stand up, and then he gets a job where he has to bend over because it's a half-size floor, and then he goes into a tunnel where he's on his hands and knees. So it just gets more and more and more compressed. And then he's inside a mind.
The decision to put dirt in the mind, taking on, you know, an organic approach rather than a sort of biological approach. So I guess it's somewhere in the middle. Grounds the film in a sense, no pun intended, but like brings it down to earth. This idea of navigating in through someone's head. I think that's pretty fantastic.
Well, it's fantastic, but it avoids the fantastic as well. It's something that's tactile that you know you're familiar with. And so it doesn't say to the film audience, oh, anything can happen now because we've gone into the world of like physics, you know, even though we are about to go into the world of anti-physics because you're reducing yourself into someone's mind, theoretically. Yeah. But the introduction to it is you go up to the 7th floor and then you open a door and then you're underground. So that's already wrong. You know, it's a bump in the night. Yeah.
For sure. But yet you're still giving the audience a sort of connection point from something that is familiar.
Yeah, you're drawing them along as opposed to something that's completely unfamiliar or familiar only in fantastic films. So it was a decision. It was a decision to go in a different direction than the script actually said, which suggested it was more like Fantastic Voyage where you're inside the body and who knows what that looks like. We just wanted to keep it grounded, like you said. Yeah. You caught it, yeah.
What is the danger of beauty in your mind? Making something beautiful?
I don't think there's ever a danger in beauty. I think there's a danger in pretty, and I think there's a danger in busyness. I think that often we're afraid to leave things bare, and so we clutter up spaces where your mind can't take it in. It just goes past it. Yeah. And I think that's a missed opportunity to make a strong statement.
Yeah, that's great.
I mean, sometimes it's necessary to have a lot of layers, but be very mindful of whether those layers mean something to the character and whether the character put them there or not. And what was the decision to put them there by that character? I'll see characters all the time in spaces that are decorated in layers and layers and layers and layers, and this person is a very simple person, and there's nothing in his story that says he would have acquired these things and what they mean to him.
Yeah. Yeah. I've done a lot of these sort of, we could say, quote unquote, realistic interiors where it's littered with dressing. And it's sort of this thing that I'm like exercising out of my system. That is, and I've been mentored by people who do some of the, most wonderful, detailed interiors. And you reach a point where it's literally like, I can't stomach it anymore. I can't stomach the idea of putting another picture on the wall, that doesn't quite directly relate to the story or the character. And it's been this ongoing, like, unlearning / discovery / awakening that I've been experiencing to get all of that out of the system. And I was reading this book by Peter Brook, theater maker who wrote The Empty Space. And he talks about, he's sort of known for minimalism in his productions. And what he said is minimalism is the end result after having tried everything and having done those interiors and having done this and doing that. Eventually you realize that that you only need what is essential. You don't need all the decor. And I think that's, unless, of course, it is intrinsically tied to the story.
Yeah. I didn't come from it that way. I came from it in the reverse. I came from the blank space and said, what if I just put one thing in? Then you have so much weight on that one thing because you're going to notice it and you're going to question why it's there. And then if you want to put a second thing in, it's going to take away a little bit of that weight, but it's also going to be under scrutiny and build up like that. And then rather than grabbing for an object, think of where the light's going to play and think of where the person's going to block the light or intersect with the light. And so I think decorating with a cinematographer is much more, and a gaffer is much more interesting than just layering and layering unknown collections of things from eras that don't apply. I've seen very successful layering, and I've seen very successful unlayering.
Yeah.
The Coen Brothers' Man Who Wasn't There is a beautiful example of very spare interiors, very smart, spare interiors.
How do you know when to leave a set alone? Like, do you ever struggle to find when it's time to just walk away and let it be finished?
And when there's no time left. That means right up until the camera rolls, I used to never be able to leave a set. I would always have to be there for every shot because I thought if they didn't use the whole set, I'd want to re-edit what the camera landed on and what the characters felt, blocked towards. And if there was something over here, if I thought there's always some weak elements in whatever you're doing, like in furniture or decor or light or a blank wall or a flat wall that they're forced up against. Something where you need more depth. I'm always trying to create depth because depth is the beginning of light and shadow and, just a more interesting frame. And so I would steal, if I thought they were never going to use one side of the room, I would steal things from that are really good and tell more story and put them in the side that they were going to use and kind of redress after they had landed or constantly adjust as they adjust.
Yeah.
It was a good game, and then I just ran out of time where I got to projects where I couldn't be on set all the time and had to give it up.
I think the idea of light being as much a production designer's tool as a DP or gaffer's tool is perhaps a bit underrated. Using light as a decorative tool in a sense. I just recently rewatched Night of the Hunter, which is
one of my favorite films.
An amazing movie. And of course, light is, everything in that movie.
What's your favorite scene in it?
Well, any moment in this sort of attic where you have the light coming from beyond. How about you?
Yeah, it also makes kind of an imposing weight coming down. It looks both church-like and it also looks ominous. It's very similar to a scene in Dr. Caligari where they painted those lines,
yes,
up and on the floor.
All that German expressionism work is amazing because it really is painted light. It's wild.
Yeah. Another scene I really like is when they go in the basement and they just show a square and then there's darkness. It's just black around and there's nothing there. It's an artificial vision of a basement being cored out of the frame, and you just see light from a stairway coming down to it, and it's a box that's the basement, and then there's black on either side, almost like letterboxed, left and right.
What other films have influenced you in a profound way? I mean, to name a few. I know there's probably an endless amount of films you could mention.
Touch of Evil was another one like that with Orson Welles, pulpy story that was very lit. It's all black. It's the noir, and then you can go to the opposite end of the spectrum and go to like 2001, where it's very spare and bright and colorful. So the films are constantly changing that I'm influenced by. But the more I get a lot of films, in my head and see things over and over again, the more I want less words, less camera movement, less editing, and more visual impact, just from camera.
It is a visual medium, after all.
You'd think it is.
You'd think. When you are gathering research for a project, like literally putting together, either these collages for the art department or lookbooks or whatever you want to call it, where are you drawing from usually? Or do you have a go-to sort of starting point?
Well, I think I've said before that I don't do research, which is nonsense. But what it meant was I'm not looking for literal references. I do a lot of visual research, but I have to do it myself. I can't have somebody else do it. Mainly because I haven't done a lot of historically accurate things, except for Marie Antoinette.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at things in my world or in photography or fashion that I can apply to something that it wasn't applied to before. So I'm trying to cross-fertilize the different artistic mediums, stealing from here and there. I'm building folders all the time, whether I'm on a project or not, about interesting architecture, interiors, exteriors, sculpture, painting, photography, fashion, music, all of those things. And I kind of build a timeline. Everybody usually has the famous wall of photos of influences that they go around in an art department, but mine are really abstract, and then they start, they mean something to me, but I can't explain them to somebody else. And then slowly they become more applicable to the scene as a location picture comes in, but then the location picture is married with another reference for a certain light or a certain color, and then you get these pairings, Research is really important, but what I'm doing is what I do the least is watch other films when I'm looking for research.
Yeah,
I'm trying to start fresh from scratch and just use instinct.
Yeah, I mean, instinct is the most powerful tool, and I think there is a danger of referencing films. That is such a quick place to go for so many filmmakers, to just fill a lookbook with screenshots from other films, which then it feels very much like a cycle of regurgitation. That it's like,
yeah, I mean, in film schools, there's an exercise where the designers have to redesign a set from a film that they know.
Yeah.
But more often than not, I've seen them take from another film and apply to this film, and that's not really fulfilling the exercise,
Right.
It's tricky, but yeah, I think every film should be as unique as possible to itself, and that's when we get excited about it.
Absolutely. I find one of my favorite things to do, I live in Midtown Atlanta right now, and I do this walk between my house and Piedmont Park, which is sort of the main green space in Atlanta. And it's about a mile long, and it fills me with endless amounts of joy just sort of to be out and make this walk. And every time I smell something different, and I'm almost knocked over by like certain smells that really just are evocative in some way, whether it's, the smell of like laundry detergent from somebody doing their laundry, or it's a new flower that's just bloomed, or it's the freshly cut grass, or the garbage that's been left out for a few too many days. And I'm always like figuring out ways of capturing that sense of emotion that I get from the smell into the visual world of the projects that I'm working on. And I wonder if you have this same kind of connection point of how to bring other senses into the work.
I think it's like when you're driving in your car and a song comes on, the lights coming through the window just at a certain way, and all of a sudden you're hit with a flood of memories. It's a combination of all of those things, where you first heard that song, where you first experienced going around a corner and having that light come into your car, and then smelling spring or smelling winter, or you'll be walking down the sidewalk and you'll smell something and go like, what is that? And you're like, oh, that's cigarettes. I haven't smelled that in so long.
Yeah.
Like things that are nostalgic and not necessarily in a good way, but are leaving our world.
I didn't think of it as something that's slipping away, that it's like almost like you're trying to hold on to something.
It's an olfactory trigger, so you'll smell the cigarettes and you go like, oh, that was the 50s and 60s, around everybody's house.
Yeah. But then you'll go home and you find photographs of, smoky street, right? The cigarette will tie in that visual connection point that then might influence the whole, tone of a scene.
I always wish that we would have, smell-o-vision, but at the same time, and we're probably close to being able to do that, but then it's going to be overused, and it's like when you run into somebody and they're wearing way too much perfume, and you go like, whoa, that's not really the effect that you intended, I don't think.
Yeah. No, it's true.
Triggers can be used like a hammer if you're not careful, like visual effects, yeah.
In trying to make something too real, you're actually doing the opposite.
Yeah, or you're bringing everything to a point, distracting rather than supporting.
I was talking to Jean-Vincent Pouzos recently, and we were talking about Amour, and how he had someone from his art department cooking meals on the stage set of the apartment for like a couple weeks leading up to the day that the actors would first enter the set.
So that it felt like a real place and it really had a smell.
Yeah, and I thought that was just brilliant. Let's talk about time. How important is time period to you, especially if there's a sense of trying to be sort of historically accurate? And how does emotion play with the period style, or making sure things are accurate as opposed to emotionally correct? How do you find that balance?
Again, it goes back to character. I mean, like, you can put things in that are historically correct, but does the character engage with them?
Yeah.
And also, you're never in the period that you're in. If you're in 1950, you're really looking at things maybe pre-war, because there was no money during the war, so there was no big sales turnover. You weren't changing furniture and stuff like that. Opulence didn't happen until the mid-50s to 60s, when all of a sudden there were no wars and there was a new economy. And so your furniture and everything would be from another time. And even that furniture may be hand-me-downs from the 20s or 30s, or your grandparents, or different things. And so the moment that you take the film at face value, it's actually echoing, it's got a tale that goes back 15, 20, 30 years. So you're not showing only things of that moment, but it's not, that's the fun of it, is when you can show things that are just coming out right then, but only if the character is experiencing it. Like if they're seeing television for the first time. It's a combination of a bunch of different cultural things happening and overlapping.
Yeah. I find your work on Marie Antoinette really amazing, and sort of also these wonderful modern sensibilities that find their way into that film. And I know you were designing that at the same time that you were sort of doing work on Where the Wild Things Are, or vice versa? I don't recall sort of what the
I
order
had
of
both.
events
I had
was.
both scripts, and I didn't know which one was going to go first.
Yeah, yeah.
And luckily, Marie Antoinette happened first, but I couldn't get Wild Things out of my mind, so I was constantly thinking about it. But there was nothing around that was, you know, applicable to going to nature, except there were a couple of scenes in Marie Antoinette where she crosses the border from Austria to French and becomes French, and we found these places in the winter where there were bare trees, and it definitely influenced exactly what I was going to do and look for and Where the Wild Things Are, but I didn't know it yet. It was such a strong impression, and we'd been thinking that we were going to green spaces, and every time I went to green spaces, it was too cozy and polite, and it didn't have anything wild about it. So raw and bare and kind of ruined was more wild than lush.
We'll go back to the word I said earlier, duality, which seems to be a common theme in many of these conversations I've been having recently about how one thing that is so seemingly disconnected from another can actually help really inspire a way into, you know, the opposite project. Or in the case of even watching, as I know you've referenced before, the idea of watching a Western to inspire the design of a rom-com, or watching a sci-fi to inspire the design of a Western. If you are trying to be influenced by other media in that sense, I think that's a great approach.
Well, in those cases, then you're just looking at like the light or the photography, or you're not looking at the objects, you know.
Right.
But you are reminded how few things have, you know, are present. Like there's in Westerns there should be very little, you know.
Yeah.
Because things had to be, you know, carried over with covered wagons or on trains later, and so possessions were limited and more practical because it was a harder life.
How do you handle conflict on set, whether it's somebody in your department or another collaborator, head of department, let's say, that is, you're not seeing eye to eye on some idea? How do you sort of navigate that? And I know it probably changes case by case.
For the longest time, I just wasn't good at it. This is something they don't teach you. You know, you get stubborn. You think you're right, and you think you're right, and then you question whether you just want to do something or if it's right and best for the film. And then once you've distilled it down to being what you think the film really needs and is supportive of the film and makes it unique, then you have to get other people on board with you. And if that doesn't happen, then you can't just be, you know, obstinate and righteous. It's a collaborative effort. It's a large collaborative effort. Everybody thinks what they're contributing is best for the film, and so you have to make sure. And this is a designer's task more often than not, is making sure everything is in the same movie together.
Yeah,
you know, everything comes from the same movie. You can't design a set that doesn't belong in this movie, or you know, it's great for this scene, but the rest of the movie isn't anything like that. And you can't have costumes that are too crazy in one point and not in another. And the same thing goes for sound, and you can't be doing fancy camera tricks all the time, and then the rest of the film is just locked off. You really have to develop a language and intertwine it with the other creatives. And so what I learned was that if you don't like something, or you think it's not the best solution, or you think it's a cliche solution in your mind, then rather than saying you don't like it, you have to have three ideas that are better, that are going to be seductive to the people that you're trying to sell your ideas to.
Yeah.
Sometimes you want to enable them into something they didn't think they were able to do, and you go like, no, we'll do that. We can make that happen. We can afford that. And everybody gets excited about it, and then you take it to another place. If nothing else, you've seduced it out of where it was into a commonplace, into a place with possibilities.
It's a bit about tapping into the subconscious, isn't it?
Yeah. It's a little psychological warfare too.
This could be the name of your book, Psychological Warfare: The Art of Production Design.
It's not warfare though. It's a fun game.
Yeah.
It's a creative sharing game. You know,
For sure.
I think sometimes your job is also to. Everybody's got a certain pot of money and limitations and time and crew and just logistics, and sometimes you have to help other teams get out of their being backed into a corner and bring them into your world, and you are assisted by their world coming to yours. Mm-hmm. Just to say like, oh, come on, we've got to start having fun again.
Yeah. Talk to me about your relationship with actors and how you sort of keep their experience in mind when designing these spaces.
We talked a lot about trying to see through the eyes of the character, but what I realized was when I was introducing actors to sets, they would have different takes than I did on what the background of that character was. And actors are very good about building their backstory. And you have to, if you've got access, you've got to kind of share with them as early as possible what you're thinking and talk to them about what they're thinking, because it helps them ground their character and it'll help you ground the space that the character occupies. And so I really like to show the actors the sets before they come in and work in them, because otherwise they may ignore them. They may not put them on like that coat that you want to. They just may be, in Dogville on a blank stage in their mind. They really need to be taking advantage of it, or hopefully comfortable with it. And they have good ideas. Good actors have very good ideas, and so because they've thought about this backstory business.
Absolutely.
And if something doesn't feel right, then they'll let you know, and you can kind of sense it, and then you realize what they need and you assist.
Yeah.
But it's a good lesson for designers to create that backstory and imagine how they arrived at these spaces that we're making for them, and what baggage they brought with them and what they jettisoned on arrival.
Yeah, I mean, there's a very kind of jazz-like component to it all, this improvisational nature of production design, I think, that you're speaking to, which is really exciting and refreshing, because it is so often, about really creating these concrete plans for a space that needs to be built within a certain amount of time and resources. But you also must always allow room for that spontaneity to kind of shift and adjust as needed.
Oh, absolutely. I think the best thing about sets is, if you don't share with all of the different factions that are going to be forced into this box, you don't share the size of the box and the openings of the box and everything else, then you better be ready to tear that box apart at any moment if there's a better idea and you realize that you may be sacrificing something that you held precious, but it's going to be better for everyone and for the story if we change something. So the more things you can make modular and changeable and adaptable, and also just go with the flow. It's like somebody said, like, you know what, I don't care, we're going to have to take this whole room and turn it 180.
You've been in this game a long time. You've done such a wide range of projects. What is it that excites you now about a new project?
I've done it a long time, but I haven't done that many projects. But I've thought a lot about the projects that I've done. I mean, there's much more prolific-looking resumes than mine. I've done very few films, but luckily some of them have hit, and they've been opposites of each other, which have given me the ability to be thought of as somebody that, can bring a sensibility to not just one genre. And that's what excites me, is doing something that I have no idea how to solve. And or I don't mind genres, as long as I can tip them on their head, because I think that that's what you owe them. to refresh them.
Yeah.
So there's lots of genres that I haven't done. A lot of my films, luckily, have been genres that are unto themselves.
Yes, very much.
It helps. It helps that I got in with really smart, creative people, and we all had the same interest in making films that were unique and not just the movie of the week.
Mm-hmm. Now, beyond just individual projects that you might work on, what excites you about the future of film and production design in general?
I think there'll be a bit of a division between artificial production design and physical production design.
Yeah.
And just like film started in nature, out in the wild because we needed natural light, and then went to studios and stages and was controlled for a long time. And then in the late 50s, people started shooting on locations again when cameras became more portable. And the camera is more portable now than it's ever been, unless you're using VistaVision or something.
Mm-hmm.
but there's still ways to make it portable.
Yeah.
And so which was shown very much so in One Battle After Another. So
yeah,
I think the lack of limitations, is what excites me. I wish we could tell more stories without over-explaining, with saying less, draw you in. I think our job is to pull you in as an audience, make you curious that you're going into some place that you've never been. You might be warmed and comforted by it, or you might be frightened as fuck about it, but you're going into it going like, what are they going to do now? Where's this going? Mm-hmm. And then that makes your audience think, and you're participating, and you're guessing what you think the story is going to be and where and why things are there. And that's the best interchange, of absorption. It's like when you're reading a book, everybody envisions things different, even though there may be very literal descriptions. You envision it only as applies to what your own visual experience is.
Yeah. And in turn, the audience will place their own lived experience on what they're seeing on the screen, right? It's that exchange.
Yeah.
I think that's about the best answer you could have given. I love this idea of tying it back to nature. And to me, that brings to mind this idea of sitting around the fire telling stories before any of these art forms or even, a thought. And I think there's something elemental about it, elemental about the need to tell stories, and also this idea of sort of refocusing the future at a moment where we're so impacted by technology and artificial, and sometimes even having a hard time telling what's real and what's not, and what a perverse question to even ask. It resonates with me that you sort of tied in this idea of natural light and nature itself, because I think that's the direction things got to move in some way.
They can move. There's no reason that we need any money to make films. I mean, Sean Becker's making great films in realistic situations with real humans and their stories. And I think the reason we like stories is because it makes us feel not alone. It makes us, touch places that other people have touched, and then you feel like, this human experience isn't so bizarre after all, because lots of people have shades of it that I've had.
Yeah.
And the storytelling can be delivered in many different ways. And I like the fact that we have all these new artificial tools, but I just want them to deliver something that I haven't seen rather than something that I've seen in a slicker way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, this brings it back to that comment, from the Hollywood poetry, and how your thoughts have evolved on the idea of it's about new combinations of things. It's sort of this great full circle moment of embracing something new, seeing something new. I think it's great.
When I looked back at that, I think that was in 1982 or 81 or 82 that we filmed those. I couldn't believe how full of myself I was, how cocky I was. But maybe that was just confidence in that you could play any kind of game and and bring your own rules to it, and succeed some of the time. So
well, yeah, and I mean, what you see as cockiness is sort of just this moment of discovery, learning, curiosity, figuring things out. I mean, like, and there is a sense of that is confidence and not cockiness, right? And you need that confidence to even break into the next level of discovering what you want to do with your life, right? I mean, that's part of it.
yeah, I think it's curiosity and delight. You're just really excited about something, and it tickles you, and sharing that may come off as cocky, but it actually it's contagious. It's in its best way. His best version is contagious. Just like I think that there's good ego and bad ego, and
Amen.
Good ego gives you the confidence to keep trying things. It's not the fake ego that builds yourself up when you're really not, because you're insecure. It's the one that says, no, you can try this. What are you going to lose?
And you can bring other people along, get them excited by it.
Yeah.
What is it that excites you now on a daily basis? Like, what's keeping you inspired lately?
Same thing it always has, just like finding things new. I mean, it's harder and harder to see things for the first time, but I've got 3 grown kids, and now I've got a 5-year-old grandson, and he's seeing everything for the first time. And so it helps you revisit things with fresh eyes and wonder why they're attached to certain things and not interested in other things. It's because you get into patterns, and it's a really important effort to break all of your patterns so that you're kind of on one foot and out of balance and have to adjust. Because if you don't have to adjust, you get in this comfort zone that you're not going to discover as many things in. So the most exciting thing every day is probably failure. What can you try with some kind of expectation and it not come out the way you wanted, but you find something else on the way that you take ownership of and you're so delighted about?
Well, I can't think of a better way to close up the conversation today. I'm always inspired by our conversations. No, I mean, but it's true. The failure it's the key. It's the key to so much, right? I mean, if you don't have failure, you'll never have any sort of success, whatever that even means, A
laboratory is all about failure. So
yeah, I think the key is figuring out how to turn failure into a victory in itself, So you have the confidence and motivation to keep going, keep trying new things.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you for everything. It's always great to talk to you. Really appreciate your time today.
Thank you. I'll see you soon, if not, hopefully in October.
That brings us to the end of our conversation today. I'd like to give a shout out to my co-producer, Gavin Mosier, and the composer of our original music, Nathan Avakian. As a reminder, if you enjoyed today's program, please consider taking a moment to rate the podcast and subscribe for upcoming episodes. Until next time, stay creative, and thanks for listening.